One, as the first numeral, is unity, but it is also the unity, the one, all oneness, individuality and non-duality, not a numeral, but a philosophical concept, an archetype and attribute of God, the monad. Carl Jung, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Pythagoras, one of the most renowned philosophers of ancient Europe, was the son of Menisarchus, an engraver. He was born around 580 BC, either on the island of Samos in the Aegean Sea, or, as some claim, in Sidon, Phoenicia. Very little is known about his early life, apart from his success in winning prizes for feats of agility at the Olympic Games. Upon reaching adulthood and feeling dissatisfied with the knowledge available in his homeland, Pythagoras left to broaden his education through extensive travel, visiting many of the great centers of learning of the time. Historical accounts suggest that his quest for wisdom took him to Egypt, Hindustan, Persia, Crete and Palestine, where he absorbed new knowledge, becoming well-versed in both the esoteric teachings and the popular exoteric knowledge of each region. Returning home with a mind enriched by his travels and a matured perspective, Pythagoras sought to establish a center for learning. However, this plan was thwarted by the opposition of the turbulent ruler, Polycrates. After this setback, he relocated to Crotona, a prominent city in Magna Graecia, a Dorian colony on the southern coast of Italy. It was here that Pythagoras founded his famous school, which gained recognition throughout the civilized world as a hub of intellectual pursuit. In the secretive gatherings of this institution, Pythagoras shared the occult knowledge he had acquired from various sources, including the gymnosophists and Brahmins of India, the Hierophants of Egypt, the Oracle of Delphi, the Idian Cave, and the Kabbalah of the Hebrew rabbis and Chaldean magi. For nearly 40 years, Pythagoras taught his students and demonstrated his remarkable abilities. However, his institution eventually came to an end, and Pythagoras was forced to flee due to a conspiracy and rebellion that arose from a conflict between the people of Crotona and the nearby city of Sybaris. He escaped to Metapontum, where he is believed to have died around 500 BC. The first notable disciple of Pythagoras was Aristeas, who married Theano, Pythagoras' widow. He was followed by Menisarchus, Pythagoras' son, and later by Pythagoras, Tydas, and Diodorus, the Aspendian. After the original Pythagorean school disbanded, key figures like Clinias and Philolaus emerged as leading instructors in Heraclea, while Theorides and Eurytus taught in Metapontum, and Archytas became the eminent philosopher of Tarentum. The Pythagorean school had several distinctive features. New members were required to observe a 5-year period of silence for reflection. The community shared all possessions, adhered to a vegetarian diet, and embraced the belief in metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls. The followers held an unwavering faith in Pythagoras, with the phrase "autos ipha," meaning "he said it," serving as the ultimate proof for any claim. As a side note, this phrase is still being used in Masonic lodges today, so there's a clue for you right there. Anyway, their strong sense of brotherhood was encapsulated in the saying, "My friend is my other self," a maxim that has endured through the ages. Pythagorean teachings were largely secret, with different subjects and levels of knowledge assigned to various stages of the student's progression. Only merit and ability allowed advancement to higher levels and more esoteric knowledge. No member was permitted to write down any teachings or doctrines, and as far as is known, this rule was never broken until after Pythagoras' death and the school's dissolution. As a result, our understanding of Pythagoras' original doctrines comes only from fragments preserved by his successors and critics. While uncertainty clouds the specifics of his teachings, there is greater clarity regarding the beliefs of his followers. Pythagoras' instruction was divided into two main areas: the science of numbers and the theory of magnitude. The former included arithmetic and musical harmony, while the latter was split into the study of geometry, magnitude at rest, and astronomy, magnitude in motion. The uniqueness of Pythagorean doctrine lies in its mathematical foundations. Numbers were believed to govern all real existence, as they were the fundamental components of mathematical quantities, which in turn mirrored various aspects of reality. Thus, it was deduced that the elements of numbers were the elements of all things. It is thought that Pythagoras introduced Europe to the study of numbers, musical principles, and physics, although evidence suggests he may have traveled to Central Asia, where he acquired the mathematical concepts central to his philosophy. His methods, later adopted by Jamblichus and others, became associated with the Italian or Doric schools. Pythagoras' followers imparted their teachings secretly to those deemed worthy by selection and training, while others were taught through symbolic numerical terms. They associated forms with numbers, such as a point with the monad, a line with the dyad, a surface with the triad, and a solid with the tetrad. Knowledge of intuition was linked to the monad, reason and causation to the dyad, imagination, form or rupa to the triad, and sensory perception of material objects to the tetrad. This numerical approach, although mystical to modern minds, formed the foundation of Pythagorean thought. Porphyry, writing around 300 AD, remarked, "The numerals of Pythagoras were hieroglyphic symbols by which he explained all ideas concerning the nature of things." This method of understanding the mysteries of nature has been revived in H.P. Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, which emphasizes that numbers serve as a key to ancient cosmology and the evolution of humanity, with religious mysticism being rooted in numerical symbolism. The sacredness of numbers begins with the great first cause, the one, and extends to the zero, representing the infinite and boundless universe. Tradition recounts that students of the Pythagorean school, initially classified as exoterici, or listeners, could ascend through merit and skill to the higher ranks of genuini, perfecti, mathematici, and ultimately the highly coveted title of esoterici. Pythagorean mathematics is fundamentally divided into the categories of even and odd numbers. An even number can be split into two equal parts without leaving a remainder, termed a monad. In contrast, an odd number divided in the same manner results in a monad positioned between the two halves. All even numbers, with the exception of the dyad, 2, which consists of two unities, can be divided into equal or unequal parts. In these divisions, parity remains distinct from imparity, and vice versa. The number 2, representing the dyad, cannot be divided into unequal parts. For example, 10 can be divided into equal parts, 5 and 5, or into parts that maintain their parity or imparity, 3 and 7 or 6 and 4. Similarly, 8 can be split into equal parts, 4 and 4, or into imparity, 5 and 3. Odd numbers, on the other hand, are only divisible into uneven parts, with one part being even and the other odd, such as 7 divided into 4 and 3 or 5 and 2. Ancient philosophers identified the monad as inherently odd and the first odd number because it cannot be equally divided. Adding a monad to an even number results in an odd number, whereas adding even to an even maintains evenness. Aristotle noted in his Pythagorean treatise that the monad also shares characteristics with even numbers, as it turns odd numbers even when added to them, and vice versa. This led to the term evenly odd, a view that Archytas of Tarentum also shared. The Pythagoreans regarded the monad as the quintessential odd number, and the dyad as the primary representation of the indefinite dyad, linking the number 2 with all that is indefinite and chaotic. They observed that in the numerical sequence, each term is increased by a monad, altering their ratios. 2 is double 1, 3 is 1.5 times 2, and so on, decreasing the ratio with each increment. In this sequence, each number is half the sum of the numbers immediately preceding and succeeding it. Evenly even describes numbers like 64, which can be evenly divided until they reach unity, forming a series such as 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Conversely, evenly odd numbers like 6, 14, and 28, when divided equally, result in parts that cannot be further divided evenly. Doubling a series of odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, produces such a series, 2, 6, 10, 14, 18. Unevenly even numbers like 24 and 28 can be evenly split, but not ad infinitum down to unity. So, odd numbers can be seen from 3 perspectives. First, and in composite, pure odd numbers like 3, 5, and 7, which are indivisible by any number other than 1. Second, and composite, odd but formed from other numbers like 9, 15, and 21, which include divisible parts. A third category applies to numbers like 9 and 25, which are composite but do not share a common divisor. These classifications use methods like the sieve of Eratosthenes, which is too complex to detail here. Even numbers are classified by the ancients into perfect, deficient, and superabundant categories, reflecting their relationships to their parts. Perfect numbers equal the sum of their parts. Deficient numbers' parts sum to less than the whole, and superabundant numbers' parts exceed the whole. Pythagoreans likened superperfect numbers to the mythological Briareus with his excessive hands, deficient numbers to the one-eyed Cyclops, and perfect numbers to the balanced virtue. Gnomons, as termed by the ancients, are odd numbers that, when added to squares, maintain the square's property, a principle also seen in geometry. A number formed by multiplying an odd and an even number was termed Aranothalus, or hermaphrodite. Philosophically, Pythagoreans believed that numerical properties mirrored nature. Definite numbers were linked to good, while indefinite numbers were associated with evil. In the human soul, a semblance of divine goodness helps balance these indefinite desires. To the Pythagorean initiates, the nature of good was definite, that of evil indefinite, and the more indefinite the nature of the evil, the worse it was. Goodness alone can define or bind the indefinite. In the human soul exists a certain vestige of divine goodness or buddhi. This bounds and moderates the indefiniteness and inequality of its desires. It can be demonstrated that all inequality arises from equality. In obtaining the power of both a mother and a root, equality pours forth with exuberant fertility all sorts of inequalities. Given sufficient space and time, it could also be shown that all inequalities may be reduced back to equality. Iamblichus, in his treatise on the arithmetic of Nicomachus, sheds light on the nature of numbers. He identifies some as resembling friends, known as amicable numbers, such as 284 and 220. When Pythagoras was asked what a friend was, he replied, "Another I." This is demonstrated in these numbers. The parts of each are generative of the other, reflecting the nature of friendship. Ozanam, a French mathematician from 1710, gives examples in his mathematical recreations of such amicable numbers. Philosophers have speculated intriguingly on the relationship between numbers and marriage, as well as the nature of their offspring. Plato, in his Republic, discusses a geometric number that, when divinely generated, determines fortune or misfortune. Nicomachus refers to this as the nuptial number and suggests that only good offspring can come from two good parents, only bad from two bad parents, and bad from a good and a bad parent. He warns the Republic against disordered wedlock, which would result in depraved offspring and subsequent discord. Simplicius, in his commentary on Aristotle's second book, On the Heavens, notes that Pythagoras and his followers believed they had heard the music of the spheres, a harmonic sound produced by the motion of the planets. From this sound, they calculated the ratios of distance and size for the Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mercury. Aristotle challenged this notion, but perhaps the difficulty might be resolved. Not all things in this sublunary sphere are commensurate, nor is everything perceivable by everyone in the same way. For instance, dogs can detect the presence of animals at great distances, a capability beyond human senses. Some ancients believed the soul possessed three vehicles: a terrestrial body, an aerial one for undergoing punishment, and an ethereal, luminous, celestial one for blissful states. It may be that someone, through purification of the senses, hereditary magical power, probity, or sacred religious operations, might perceive things imperceptible to us and hear sounds inaudible to those still in bondage. Or perhaps, with a mantle partly unfolded, some adept or truth-seeker, with eyes upraised, might see sights invisible to mortals while still deaf to the sounds beyond. Why do we see the stars, yet hear not their motion? Why do angels not visit the earth from the realms of glory, as in days of old? Is heaven more distant, or has the earth grown cold? The number one, or the monad, has been defined by the mathematician Theon of Smyrna as the principle and element of numbers, which, while multitude can be lessened by subtraction, is itself deprived of every number and remains stable and firm. Hence, as a number, it is indivisible, remains immutable, and even when multiplied by itself, remains only itself, since one multiplied by one is still one. The monad multiplied by the monad remains the immutable monad to infinity. It stands alone among numbers, for no number can be subtracted from it or separated from its unity. Proclus observed, "The first monad is the world itself, the second is the ineratic sphere, then follow the spheres of the planets, each a unity, and lastly are the spheres of the elements, which are also monads. These, having perpetual subsistence, are called wholenesses, holotetes in Greek." The monad, unity, or the number one, has received numerous meanings. Photius tells us that the Pythagoreans gave it at least 24 names, including God, the first of all things, the maker of all things; intellect, the source of all ideas; matter, the last development of universality; chaos, which resembles the infinite, undifferentiated; confusion, the point within a circle, the central fire deity, and so on. The lingam, an upright pillar, was its Hindu symbol. The monad, being esteemed the father of numbers, is the reason for the universal preference for odd numbers over even ones, which are merely copies of the first even number, the Dyad, or universal mother. The father is more esteemed than the mother, as stated by the saying, might. Odd numbers were assigned to the greater gods, and even ones to the inferior and terrestrial deities. The number one is represented in the Roman and Arabic numeral systems by a simple upright line, but in many ancient systems, where numerals were also letters, almost universally the letter A, from being chosen to commence the set of letters, had the task of representing the monad. In numeration, note that the Romans began with lines from 1 to 4 and then followed with the acute angle 5 for 5, then doubled this for 10, x, laid down the angle for 50, L, inverted 1 for 100, C, and combined C and L for 500, D. Hermias, the Christian philosopher and author of Ridicule of the Gentile Philosophers, quotes from the Pythagoreans, "The monad is the beginning of all things, archeton panton himonas." The figure of 1 signifies identity, equality, existence, and preservation. It signifies the living man alone among animals as erect. On adding a head, we make of it P, the sign of creative power, paternity, phallus, Pan, the Greek gods, and Priapus, all commencing with the letter P. Another dash added, and we have a man walking, advancing, with a foot set forward in the letter R, which signifies fens, iturus, or advancing. Compare unity, solus, alone, the unique principle of good, with Sol, the sun god, the emblem of supreme power, and they are identical. The Hebrew word for 1 is achad, and it is often used for God. God's voice to man is the Bath Kol, the echo or daughter of the divine voice. The Talmud in Berakoth states that the Shekinah shall rest even upon one who studies the law. One pang of remorse is more effective for reformation than many stripes. One thing obtained with difficulty is more valued than 100 obtained with ease. It is unwise for one man to sleep in a house alone, for fear that he may be attacked by Lilith, who was said to have been Adam's first wife. She is the night spectre, and also has power over newly born infants who are not protected by an amulet. Rabbi Nathan exhorted, "Repent one day before your death," a wise maxim inculcating the duty of always being prepared. Every day some advance in knowledge and goodness should be attained. Ever work and ever pray, for the road winds upward all the way, as Lord Buddha taught in ancient India. Just as the monad, 1, represents many different concepts, so does the dyad, 2, even though these concepts can be very different and hard to connect to each other. First, the dyad is seen as the opposite of the monad. It represents difference and diversity, while the monad represents sameness and unity. If the monad is about unity, the dyad is about division and contrast. The monad and dyad can also be understood as bound, 1, and infinity, 2. The dyad is called audacity because it was the first to separate from the divine one, breaking away from divine unity. It is also referred to as matter, representing form and the cause of physical substance and separation. The dyad is seen as the bridge between the monad, 1, and multiplicity, many. Proclus, an ancient philosopher, explained this using arithmetic. 1 plus 1, the dyad, is the first step towards many, multiplicity. The dyad is a balance between unity and number, where adding and multiplying it yields the same result. It is known as the fountain of symphony and harmony, for it brings together different elements. It is associated with erato, a figure symbolizing attraction like love, because it pulls towards itself another number. The dyad is also called patience, as it is the first to exist separately from the monad. It is known as phanes, representing intellect or the mind, and is considered the source of all female divinities like Nature, Rhea, and Isis. Like Cupid, it represents the desire for a counterpart. In astronomy, 2 nodes are known as the head and tail of the dragon, Caput and Cauda Draconis. In astrology, the planets have 2 aspects, benefic, positive, and malefic, negative. 2 pillars, Jachin and Boaz, stand at the entrance of King Solomon's temple, symbolizing strength and stability. These are similar to the 2 figures, Kratos, strength, and Bia, force, who bind Prometheus in Greek mythology. In Chinese philosophy, the color blue is seen as a combination of red, male, active, and black, female, passive, representing both light and dark, active and passive, brilliant and obscure. Followers of Pythagoras described two types of pleasure: indulgence of the senses, like the dangerous allure of the sirens, and pure, just pleasures that bring no regret. Philosopher Hierocles stated that two things are essential for life: support from family and the kindness of others. In ancient Egyptian symbols, two serpents entwined around a globe or egg represent the world. Another symbol connects a tree and a serpent, referring to the biblical tree of knowledge and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Some believe that it was only after the serpent was cursed to crawl on its belly that it became limbless. A church leader suggested that the serpent in this story might have been an ape, but this simply replaces one interpretation with another. During the Bacchic rites, worshippers with snakes in their hair would chant about Eve, through whom sin entered the world. The concept of duality brings us to the contrast between unity, good, and division, evil, and other opposites such as day and night, light and dark, health and disease, and male and female. These are unavoidable contrasts in human experience. The number 2 is also associated with mourning and death. Many historical figures named the Second met unhappy fates, such as William II, Edward II, and Richard II of England, who were all murdered. The Romans dedicated the second month to Pluto, the god of the underworld, and offered sacrifices to the spirits of the dead on the second day. Pope John established All Souls' Day on November 2nd to honor the dead. Jewish teachings also have many ideas about the number 2. They say that not everyone deserves 2 tables, which means enjoying both the blessings of this life and the next. They recommend sleeping with the bed aligned from north to south and say that there are 2 paths in life, one to paradise and one to Gehenna, a place of punishment. There are also 2 fundamental Jewish laws, the written Torah and the oral Kabbalah. On the eve of the Sabbath, 2 angels, one good and one bad, accompany a Jew from the synagogue to his home. If the house is in order, the good angel blesses it. If not, the bad angel curses it. The saying 2 is better than 3 suggests that youth, 2 legs, is better than old age, a 3rd leg, or a cane. There are stories of 2 women with unpleasant names, Deborah, meaning wasp, and Hulda, meaning weasel. Many believe that names can predict a person's fate or character. Words may be worth a small coin, selah, but silence is worth 2 coins. One story tells of a man with 2 wives, one young and one old. To keep him looking young, the younger wife pulled out his grey hairs, while the older wife pulled out his black hairs, leaving him bald. 2 dry pieces of wood can easily burn 1 green piece. The Talmud offers various ideas about the number 2, such as the belief that Adam had 2 faces, or that Eve was created from his 13th rib to prevent her from being vain, talkative, or jealous. However, despite these intentions, women are said to have developed these traits. In any argument, the one who concedes first is seen as having the noblest character. In Jewish tradition, 2 negatives or affirmatives hold as much weight as an oath. The book of Revelation in the New Testament speaks of 2 witnesses, 2 olive trees, and 2 candlesticks. If a dream occurs twice, it is considered a true prophecy, as seen in various biblical passages. The natural world shows that all life arises from pairs, male and female. Modern science shows that reproduction involves sperm and egg, but ancient philosophers in India, Egypt, and among the Gnostics already spoke of creation coming from a serpent and an egg. The number 3, often referred to as the Triad, holds a significant place in many areas due to its unique properties. It's the first odd number that possesses energy and is considered the first perfect number because it represents a form of completeness or wholeness. Photius noted that the Triad serves as a balance and connection point because most comparisons and relationships involve at least 3 components. This is why the ancients referred to it as the middle or analogy. In geometry, the Triad is pivotal because the triangle, made up of 3 sides, is the simplest and most stable shape. This idea extends to music, where the Triad governs the 3 primary harmonies, the octave, the 5th, and the 4th, creating a foundational musical structure. In astronomy, the number 3 appears in the organization of celestial bodies and signs, dividing them into groups of 3, reflecting its importance in understanding the cosmos. The number 3 also has profound spiritual and mythological significance. Many cultures perceive it as sacred. For example, the oracles in ancient Greece, like the one at Delphi, often delivered prophecies from a tripod, which symbolizes the Triad's stability and insight. In Christianity, it appears as the Holy Trinity of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Hinduism has the Trimurti, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. The ancient Egyptians worshipped Osiris, Isis, and Horus as a divine family trio. The number 3 also shows its significance through cultural symbols and legal and social structures. In many judicial systems, legal proclamations or court sessions start with the call Oyez, 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 repeated 3 times to command attention. The shamrock, a symbol of Ireland, typically has 3 leaves. In storytelling and public speaking, grouping information into 3s is a common technique to create rhythm and impact. In health and medicine, ancient and some modern interpretations believed in categorizing ailments and treatments in groups of 3, reflecting the Triad's perceived completeness in understanding and organizing knowledge. Furthermore, the Triad influences dreams and prophecies, suggesting that the most truthful dreams are those that occur in a pattern of 3, such as the last dream before waking. Thus, across various disciplines and cultures, the number 3 is revered not only for its mathematical properties, but also for its deep symbolic resonance that touches on the very structure of reality and human understanding. It's a number that brings order, balance, and profound meaning to numerous aspects of life.